Just over a year ago, I went on a trip back to China to visit family and explore places I haven't been to before. This was the first time I had been back since March of 2018. That's right, nearly 6 years since I last visited. And I vlogged the whole thing in the hopes of bringing a part of my roots and culture to you. So join me as we go on a journey back to my homeland. Starting off, I landed in Shanghai, one of the most famous cities in China, and for good reason. The place is an economic center and it shows. Case in point, the Pudong district. Shanghai is separated into two main sections, Pudong and Puxi. The name comes from which side of the Huangpu River each section is on. Pudong is on the east and Puxi on the west. This place was originally pretty impoverished and underdeveloped until the 90s, when the government began a special economic zone in the area. And since then, it essentially became the heart of China's economy. Much of China's finance and trade comes from this area, and it's still growing. I also got to see the Waibaidu Bridge, China's first all-steel bridge. The one that you see standing today was built by the British in 1907. It has been through a lot of history, including the Second Sino-Japanese War, where many refugees used it to escape the Japanese army. Anyways, there's some Shanghai history for you, but for now, it's time to explore the city. After stopping for some coffee and a treat, it was time to wander the streets, starting with Shanghai Old Street. Here, I got to try Chinese berry teas and found a personal heaven for all overseas Chinese kids. This candy man brings back memories. And it's here where I want to insert a personal anecdote about visiting Shanghai. Being born overseas and speaking Chinese at home, I can speak Chinese fluently, but reading it is a bit harder for me. So since I came on this trip with my dad, we would do this thing where at every metro station, he would get me to try to read the station names on the signs and see how many I could get right. And the bystanders around us would just see this 20-year-old who, for all intents and purposes, looked exactly like one of their own, trying to read metro station names. I don't know whether to laugh or be embarrassed. Maybe both. But because my new personal mission on these vlogs is to make you as hungry as possible, it's about time I got started on that. Trust me when I say that, when you visit China, you will eat well. Behold, wonton soup, fried rice, tofu soup, at least I think that's tofu soup because I can't remember the actual name, and shengjianbao. I also got to visit Shanghai's Starbucks Reserve Roastery and saw this work of art. Speaking of coffee, by the way, it was here that I first ran into Luckin Coffee, one of the most famous coffee franchises in China. And I don't know if it's just me, but every time I see this sign, I think the L is an F. Can you blame me? Why did they design the logo like that? Well, actually, now that I think about it, that'd be a sick cafe name. Anyways, back to Shanghai. I'm exploring the Old District, an area preserved for its history but also with some modern renovations. To me, it's an important relic of the past while providing a good contrast to show how far our country has come. And that's something else to note. I've spent my entire childhood growing up in the suburbs of the Greater Vancouver area. For basically my entire life, I've never seen a city that was as bustling as Shanghai. I mean, just look at Pudong at night. While staying here and soaking in the sights, I couldn't help but think to myself, I'd like to live here someday. The other reason being the food. Look at this meal. Squirrel fish with shrimp along with more fried rice. Let the drool flow. Also, there was one meal I'll never forget. A restaurant in one of Shanghai's largest malls that sold crab roe noodles. To start, we have a delicious herbal soup and amazing tea, plus all of this. Squirrel fish, side dishes, and crab roe noodles. Remember, I went on this trip with my dad, and we ordered food for 2 people. Do you know how much all of that cost? 400 yuan, which approximates to about 80 Canadian dollars. Let me remind you, that's crab roe. I shudder to think how much this would cost in Vancouver. There was also enough time to visit more attractions like the St. Ignatius Cathedral and Peace Hotel. But eventually it was time to leave, so I boarded the magnet train to my hometown. Side note, this was the first time I had ever been on any magnet train, and I won't lie, I was impressed. It went at an average of about 300 kilometers per hour, but against my expectations, the inside was really silent and stable. Within 5 hours, it brought me halfway across the country. Now with that said, you may wonder where my hometown is. Let me introduce you. Welcome to Tianjin, one of China's 4 municipalities alongside Beijing, Shanghai, and Chongqing. It's a northern port city right next to the capital of Beijing. After learning the history of the city, it's amazing how well it's recovered and redeveloped since the 1976 earthquake, which, side note, is the deadliest earthquake ever recorded. I also want to draw attention to the city's improvement. I won't lie, back when I was a kid, I used to hate coming back to China for one simple reason. The pollution. Remember, this was the early 2010s, so the pollution, particularly in the north where Tianjin was, it was bad. But when I last visited in 2018, the pollution was almost completely gone. The sky's blue and clear with no trace of the smog I once dreaded so much. That said, it's time for food once more. This time more of a unique twist because I went to McDonald's, and fast food chains in China are extremely localized. For example, this Chinese McDonald's location sold taro pies. After trying it, I need this. McDonald's isn't the only Western chain in China. There's also Pizza Hut. KFC has more locations in China than in the US. And to my surprise, I even found Tim Hortons multiple times. I knew it was big in Canada. I didn't know it was this big. Oh, speaking of McDonald's, this is probably the part where I should tell you something about visiting China. In fact, this was the one thing that annoyed me the most. The internet. And no, I don't just mean the Great Firewall. That's old news. It's easy to get around with VPNs. That's not the problem. Here's the thing about public Wi-Fi in China. It's free, yes, but you almost always have to sign in with a Chinese phone number, which, most visitors, including myself, don't have. Now, some workers are really nice and they'll let you sign in with their own phone numbers, but if you want to avoid this problem altogether, I'd recommend getting a data card. Oh, another thing. Because Google doesn't work in China unless you can get around the firewall, you'll have to use the Chinese apps. And as far as I know, most of these apps don't actually have English translations, so it can be quite daunting if you don't go with someone who knows the language. The final part about China not being very visitor-friendly is technological advancement. No, I am not kidding. Everything, and I mean everything, is paid for using QR codes. Some places just outright won't accept cash. Some beggars even use QR codes. Yes, it's that advanced. Back to Tianjin, here's one of its main attractions, 古文化街, or the Ancient Culture Street. With its construction starting during the Yuan dynasty, this street contains some of the oldest buildings in Tianjin. But looking at how empty the place is, I can't help but be reminded the city is supposed to be facing some economic hardship. Not to say the economy is bad, it's still miles better than Vancouver right now, but its growth has been slowing in recent years. You know what the economy hasn't affected though? The food. There's also a Starbucks Reserve Roastery with this beautiful coffee art. And because this city is on Beijing's doorstep, we have Peking duck. Actually, no. I refuse to call it that. It's called Beijing Haoya. Say its name.
Say my name.
There were also delicious seafood dishes and soups. Honestly, visiting that restaurant in particular was a huge family bonding moment for me because I heard from my dad that it was the same restaurant where he and my mom had their wedding dinner after all these years. It was still running. After some more good food, it was time to explore the streets again, and hey look, it's Gobuli! If you didn't know, Gobuli is a really well-known pork bun restaurant chain in Tianjin. Actually, I think it's a bit of a meme in Tianjin. Weirdly enough, I found out that sometimes it's translated as go believe, which is completely inaccurate because the actual translation means something like dog ignore. Actually, on that note, here's a funny little quirk about visiting China. There are these little signs everywhere that tell you to do something, but in a funny way. For example, there's this one that translates to show mercy with your hands and leave the green beneath your feet. Honestly, the grammar doesn't really work well with this one, but it basically tells you not to step on the grass. Here's a better one asking the same thing, which translates to the grass blades have lives, please show mercy with your feet. The signs are good, but even funnier are the ones with English translations because they're not mistranslated per se, but they do sound really awkward and unnatural. For example, this one in a men's bathroom asking people to step closer to the urinals, saying, one small step forward, one big step to being civilized. But the translation on the sign reads, a small step toward, one step civilization. Listen, for all the people in the country and for all the people we have living overseas who are bilingual, this is the best translation we could come up with? Really? Anyways, I mentioned before that I came back to Tianjin to visit family. And it's true, The whole time I stayed with my grandparents. Near their apartment is the People's Park, Tianjin edition, because a lot of Chinese cities have them. It's a really nice park built during the Qing dynasty, was donated to the nation following the Civil War, then opened to the public in 1951. This is what makes Tianjin's People's Park so unique. Chairman Mao donated his calligraphy of the park's name. That calligraphy was used as the sign, and to this day, it's the only park in China with Mao's calligraphy. While exploring Tianjin, I rediscovered my love of the city, which had kind of faded after not visiting for so long. It has its problems, but it's where I'm from, even though I was born in Canada. It has a healthy mix of old and new, a city of advancement while keeping its culture to be admired. And that culture involves food. Time to be hungry again. Look at all of this. Feel your mouth water. Feel your stomach growling. You're getting hungry and jealous. I know it. The attractions of Tianjin also include our Italian-style town, which was built when Italy briefly controlled the area. We also have older stuff like Yangliuqing, a town known for its production of Nianhua, or New Year pictures. New Year pictures frequently featured women and children, and families often replace their pictures during Chinese New Year, as a way of moving from the past to the future. And I distinctly remember my conversation with the local expert, explaining the intricate process of creating Nianhua, and bemoaning how the digital era has caused the new generation to lose interest in continuing this traditional art. It's a sobering reminder that while advancement is good and necessary, we should also preserve what the past gave us as a way of retaining our identity. Here's another interesting tourist spot in Tianjin, the China House, as in the material, otherwise known as the Porcelain House. This place is a museum of antiques and decorated with porcelain everywhere. And I really do mean everywhere. After that, I got to visit Tianjin Water Park, one of the most famous tourist spots in the city, because this park's history is long, as in 2,000 years. Yes, this park's history goes all the way back to the 1st century AD, but its official establishment as a park took place in the 1800s. It became popular with students of the nearby Beiyang and Nankai universities for swimming, and since then it has become one of Tianjin's most well-known attractions. But with that, our stay in Tianjin was coming to an end. To end off, we had one last family dinner together. I still miss them, but I'll be back soon. The next morning, my dad and I took the magnet train to Shanghai again. It's time for round 2, folks. And round who knows how many of making you hungry. Whatever your thoughts are on visiting China, you can't deny that we have great food. Oh, and once more I have Chinese McDonald's propaganda because this time I had congee and an Asian dough stick. Back to visiting Shanghai. No specific tourist spots this time, just wandering the city for a bit. Recently, I've been trying to connect more deeply with my Chinese roots and getting more familiar with our culture. A lot of it through watching movies, most recently this one. And visiting China for the first time in almost 6 years was a significant moment for me, even if at times it just felt like a change of environment. Not coming back for so long definitely made me feel distant from my roots, and for a brief period in university, I even struggled a little with speaking Chinese. Returning felt like a healing moment for me. It was also nice to see family again. You know, the classic Asian family gatherings where you have like 50 cousins you don't recognize, but for some reason everyone knows you. And while I enjoyed my time throughout, it did hurt to see my family getting older, my grandparents in particular. It's a sobering reminder that time is precious. Life is precious. If nothing else, I want you to take this from this vlog. I know how easy it is to fall into that trap of always thinking about what you should have done or what you wish you had when things aren't going your way. I'm saying this because I've fallen into the same trap more times than I can count. But however tough it might be, try not to focus on the negatives in life and cherish what you have. Because with how fast modern life moves, we often forget how special it is just to be alive. I definitely want to come back to China in the very near future. I think it's really important to reconnect with my Chinese roots and, you know, all the China national team videos on my channel. Yes, they're basically therapy for my pain, and they're also the most successful videos on my channel, but in a way, they're also a way for me to connect with my culture again. So yeah, I don't plan on stopping this anytime soon, and I hope you'll be there with me on that journey. Finally, after more than a year, I finally got around to making this vlog. Took me long enough, Next up, we'll be talking about the China national team again. You know, World Cup qualifiers coming up. We play Saudi Arabia on March 20th. How are our chances looking? Let's not talk about that now. If you like this video, like and subscribe, follow my Instagram and my Twitter, yada yada yada, and I'll see you next time. Take care.